of that because it's just general real conversation.
Yeah,
There you go.
there we go now.
All right.
All recording. Just wait.
Because the best conversations are the kind of conversation that you'd have at the pub.
Oh yeah,
Seriously,
absolutely.
right? You're talking with people who love the sport like you love it, whether it's runners or other coaches. You just have a casual conversation. You're excited about topics, and it goes here and there and meanders all over the place. But you
Yeah.
end up being inspired because it's such an organic, such a natural flow of ideas. I was just talking to you now that you're recording about, one of my favorite coaches of all time was Harry Wilson down in the UK, and he developed a lot of athletes to super high level. People like Steve Ovett and Julian Gorder and Wendy Sly, people like that, and a myriad of others who probably never reached super highest levels, but they were pretty much nobodies when they started working with Harry. And Harry, along with two or three others, were in charge of basically every aspect of middle distance and endurance coaching education in the UK, largely because they were totally invested. They had lots of experience, having run in the 50s and beyond as athletes themselves. And I think if you look at their rhetoric, whether it was verbal or written, they really wanted to make UK one of the best countries in the world when it came to international competitions, whether the Commonwealth Games or whether the Olympics. They just wanted a small country to just kick butt and do great and have athletes succeed at high levels. So they did everything possible, whether it was local clinics, formal big clinics, working with club coaches, um, traveling, just spreading the good news, going to other UK countries, all the way down to Australia and helping them. But Harry would talk about the average athlete as being ignored
Mm.
uh, because the coaches of the clubs thought that these athletes didn't have talent, that
Yeah.
there was a ceiling, and they're just not going to get above it. They don't have the genetic ability. And Harry would say, "Look, I'll give you one example," and I forget the name of the individual. He wrote about it in Athletics Weekly, and he said, this guy came to me. He was 28 years old. He was a Joe Bloke. He was nobody that anybody would give the time of day to because he was a plotter. He would just get out and he would never be great. And Harry said, let's take a look at your history and see where you have done well and not done well. And it turned out every time this guy started doing high intensity interval training, repetition training, he became flat and performed poorly. He might have some good workouts, but on race day, he performed way below expectation. And so Harry said, look, why don't we just avoid the high intensity workouts for a couple months, put you in a race and see what happens. And the guy ends up running a 2-minute PR, a PB. You guys call it PB in the UK. That's okay. The United States is adopting your approach, but
Mhm.
it's becoming PB more and more often. That's
Nice.
because our guys travel internationally. They get rubbed off by the UK. Anyway, uh, this guy ended up improving from 31:30 to 29:20
Wow.
in a matter of 2 months. All he did was run 160 to 180 miles a week. No interval workout. He just ran and ran and ran, like unbelievable consistency day after day, putting in 20 to 25 miles a day,
Right.
2 runs. And
Wow.
Harry's like, okay, so this Joe Bloke guy really does have some ability. He was training wrong all the time. The guy ended up running 28:30 a year later.
Wow.
Okay, so here is a guy that perhaps if he had been guided correctly earlier in his running career, might have represented England or the UK in Commonwealth or something. But now this guy was, 30, 31, 32 years old. He's getting up there. He's pretty much past his primary years of athletic performance in the early to mid 20s. And that's kind of how I look at things too, like Harry Wilson looks at it. That we have this pathway that we think everybody should travel down, and that there's only one way to succeed. You got to do harder workouts or more mileage or more this or more that, just the way that we've always done it. This leads to the questions, you posed to me, and I reviewed them real quickly. What's my coaching philosophy? My coaching philosophy is everybody's unique, and it's the coach's job to figure out what the underlying profile is for that athlete in order to help them. And there'll be individuals on your team who need to cross train a lot because they're injury prone, and there are athletes on your program, in your club or in your particular program, that need high mileage and not many workouts. And there are people in the middle that need a moderate amount of mileage and more workouts. And some people really peak quickly. I've coached athletes, like in America. I have an athlete who's now at a major university, sub 4 minute miler in high school. I've coached two of them, only coaching the US to have that privilege. And this individual, he only needs about 4 races or 5 races, and he's on top of his game. And then he starts losing his mojo, especially mentally. And it become less exciting to him, and he kind of flattens out. So for this individual, then you have the choice. If you're a coach, do you just hold off and not have him compete, or wait until about a 4-month or 4 weeks before his major event, and then boom, throw him in a small series of races, and the 4th or 5th one is his championship race? Or do you have him compete but spread out his races significantly so they're not close together?
Yeah.
Both approaches will work for this individual. Now, there are other people that need up to 7 races. There's almost nobody, in my opinion, needs more than 7 races. Mm-hmm. Mark my words, you run more than 7 races, say in a 3-month period, you're unlikely to be at your best when you need to be. Yeah. You've raced too much, because there's both the physical and the mental, emotional component, that goes into play. And you can't dip into the cup, too many times, and before you know it, the cup is empty. A mentor coach of mine named Al Carius, he was at North Central College, a suburb of Chicago, one of the most impressive distance running coaches in U.S. history, often not recognized internationally or even nationally outside of Division III, because in the NCAA we have Divisions 1, 2, and 3, and 3 is non-scholarship. But the athletes that have come out of his program over the decades have been absolutely impressive. Taken average everyday Joes and made them into superstar athletes after 4 years. And Al Carius told me one time in a meeting, we were waiting for the speaker to come up, and he turned to me and said, "What's on your mind?" He goes, you obviously have some questions you want to ask, because every time I see you, you're always asking questions. I said, "Well, yes, sir, I do." I said, "How many times does it take to get to your best level in a season?" He goes, 4. Always 4. You only got 4 times you can dig deep emotionally in a competitive season, then you're drained. Once, he said, think of it as a big glass of water. You got 4 big sips. Once that water's gone out of the cup, it doesn't matter if you're physically in shape. You'll be flat as a pancake. You will not perform up to your level, your physical level. You're emotionally drained. So that's why you have to be really careful about the races you choose and how much emotional energy you put into them. Some races you simply have to use as workouts.
Yeah.
So my athletes all the time, you say, use this as a solid workout. Don't get hyped up for it. You're way too far away from the championship event. We don't want to drink we don't want to drink the water out of your cup too early.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a big deal. There's a big deal because so many athletes put their heart and soul into their training to come up short on race day, and they can't figure out why. They did more miles, they did better workouts, they did more weeks of preparation, more sacrifice, and they fall short. And I say so much of it is not really about talent, but strategy. Strategy is such a big deal. Think of it this way. The three of us are, let's say the three of us work at the same school, we're educators. We can have, and let's say we're in mathematics, just to make this simple. We can give assignments where the athletes do, or not the athletes, the students do worksheet after worksheet, page after page, the same stuff, the same questions. Okay? Is it possible that they could reach this ceiling, let's say 80% of their potential, and no matter how many more problems they solve of the same kind, they're not going to go above that ceiling? And we just rely on the repetition method of learning. If you do more of it, you'll just get better.
Mhm.
Rather than the three of us, we meet and we figure out what kinds of challenges can we give the students to go outside of their normal way of thinking? What strategies can, even if they take a little bit longer to execute, get them to a higher level of problem-solving ability?
Yeah.
And 8 weeks later, after going through a different strategy, a different approach, these students, I keep saying athletes, I'm so accustomed working with athletes, but these
Yeah.
students have more tools, more ways of recognizing the nuances of problems, more models in their mind of how to execute the algorithm, which algorithm to choose, how to differentiate. And these kids all of a sudden become so-called much smarter.
Mhm. It's like
Right?
in Britain, well, in Scotland, when I started running, I'm 34 now. Well, I started when I was 15, 16. I was always told you need to work as hard as you can at every session until you spew. And your easy runs, if you're just jogging, you're not getting any benefit. I was told that. And whereas now, look at Arthur Lydiard training, reading up on well, I've seen a few of your talks on YouTube as well. It's the complete opposite. No, the Kenyans don't do that. And when you look at, we interviewed a Scottish 1500 meter runner not long ago, a guy called Neil Gourley, who's based out in the US.
Oh,
Yeah,
yep.
he's run 144 and 330, but the majority of his training is aerobic threshold. So, and
Whoa.
yeah, and it's like, okay, that kind of goes against what you're told when you're younger. So if you want to be a 1500 meter runner, you've got to be doing all this fast stuff all the time. But a lot of them are doing 100-mile weeks, a lot of aerobic conditioning. And then when it comes to the track work, they are doing the speed, but the majority of the year is a lot of aerobic conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I mean, there is both good and bad to the history of training methodology in our sport. The good is we had some precedent from people like Arthur Lydiard and Percy Cerruti, and then people come along like Harry Wilson, who said, look, we need endurance. You need endurance. And if you have endurance, then you can do more quality repetitions to recover from them faster. And you can go through the rounds better because in the championship events usually have a qualifying and a final. In the old days, you had a prelim a quarterfinal final, or I mean quarterfinal, semifinal, final. They got rid of some of that, and it was even more important. But you really, really saw anybody who had endurance doing well in the final compared to those who only speed trained, anaerobically trained.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I, I, I really wish I could talk to my younger self. I could go back and do things all over again because I would have followed what worked for me in the off season during the season. When the off season, when I didn't have formal coaching and I trained myself and I ran in some road races for fun, I was crushing it. And I was running very comfortably on most of my days. And once a week, I would do some 10K pace training, which I later called critical velocity, because I figured out it wasn't so much your 10K pace, but a specific intensity, and it's closer to 32 minutes where I optimize it. I round it off in my conversations with everybody and my instructors, say half an hour, because that's easier to understand, half an hour racing pace, but it really is closer to 32 minutes on average. There's a little bit of a bell curve there. You got 800-meter runners that might be 26, 27, 28 minutes. Your long distance marathoners closer to 40, 41, 42 minutes. But on average, it's around 32 minutes. But if you train at that intensity, you become good aerobically in a wide array, all the way from the middle distance to the marathon and beyond. And what I was finding in the off season is that I was becoming good at everything, even though I wasn't pounding away at mile pace or goal pace training.
Mm.
I wasn't even doing striders back then in the off season. For example, the off season for us in the United States would be basically June, July, and half of August. And then you would go back into formal training with your high school team. And I'd be running 10K races and doing long runs over very hilly. Where I lived was super hilly, much like where you live, Sean. And at the end of the summer, you would think I would have no speed, no ability to run the mile, but we do a mile time trial as part of cross country formal practice on the first week. And I'd run faster than I ever did in the track season when I'm doing 10 times 400 at goal pace.
Yep.
I'm like, this doesn't match up. I'm 10 seconds faster in the mile, and I'm actually doing it on grass with 90-degree turns, not smooth curves. And not only that, I wasn't laying on the ground like I was in track. I was walking around for 30 seconds, then I was able to start jogging. I recovered fast. It was unbelievable, the difference.
And how many miles were you doing during that
About
kind of
45 or 50,
Mhm.
45 or 50 a week
Well, that
in
was
high
great.
school. And when I was, say, 16, 17, 18, yeah, 45, 50. But I worked 2 or 3 jobs also all summer. So I was, up at 5 a.m., working my first job. And so I was doing singles. I wasn't doing doubles. I didn't have time for doubles. I was working 12 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
So I would just run at about 8 o'clock in the evening and in the summertime and go run, 6, 7, 8, 9 miles, something like that over hilly courses. And I would do, 10K pace fartlek workouts. I do it strictly by time, 4 or 5 minutes faster, 1 minute slower, often 2 minutes slower if it was hot and humid. Then I found that if I tried to do it at 5K pace or faster, those intervals, I couldn't last past 2 or 3 weeks. My legs would start feeling terrible during the 10K race. And I'm like, all right, this isn't matching up. I need to slow down. It doesn't seem logical, but there's an optimal intensity and it's not maximal, not as hard as I can go. And I was, don't get me wrong, I wasn't one of those that was only a marathon type guy with slow twitch muscle. I had great sprint speed, short sprint speed. I played other ball sports. I could run as fast as anybody in the sprints. So it wasn't like just because I had a muscle profile of a long distance runner that the 10K pace and the long
Yeah.
easy runs was beneficial.
Mhm.
So
But
it made me think, I wonder if my teammates are in the same boat as me. Because we had a lot of guys in our team that played other sports. We ran cross country, and then we played basketball in the wintertime, and then we ran track in the springtime. Maybe they're just doing all these hard intervals and they're reaching their ceiling too. Maybe they need to slow down their intervals and maybe they need to do more distance work. And I started asking older athletes that would come back to our high school in the summer and they'd run in late August with us before they had to join their university team, what they had learned at the university level. And I was hearing over and over again that they learned to do more distance work, slow down under easy days, avoid injury at all cost, don't get in a rush to get in shape early in the season because it just didn't matter. Because you try to do that, by the end of the season, you got nothing left. Patience, patience, patience was a big message I was hearing. In fact, one guy came back to our school. I remember it was August 18th. He had to go 2 days later to the university, and was in Missouri. And we were up in Northern Illinois where I grew up. And I couldn't believe this guy was fast. I said, "What are you running for cross country?" He said, it was 5 miles back then for unless you went to the national championships. It was 5 miles. I said, "What are you running?" He goes, not too bad. I'm like third on my team. I go, "Well, what kind of time?" He goes, 24:20, 24:30. I'm like, "You were in high school. I don't even remember your name. I mean, you were so far down on the list." He goes, "No, I'm not even on the list. I'm not even in the top 50 in high school." I'm like, "What?" I said, "What was your mile best?" 5:25. You ran 5:25 in high school? What was your cross country best for 3 miles? We ran 3 miles, not 5K, 3 miles in high school. 21:30. 21:30. Did you run in the off season in high school? Yep, I sure did. 30 miles a week. So you never ran fast than that? He goes, "Yeah, we just did 400s all the time. It's all we ever did. 400s, 400s. What happened in college? First day I showed up, the coach said, "We're doing a 10-mile run," and I about had a heart attack," he said. 10 miles? I was running like 4. He said, 10 miles. If you complete it, I'll let you stay in the team. If you don't, you're off the team. So he completed the 10 miles, and he thought, "I'm in a whole different world." And here's what happened. It only took him 3 months of running 70 miles a week to start running under 4:30 in the mile. They did a mile time trial on the track, and he ran under 4:30. And remember, this guy had a 5:25 PR.
That's wild.
He's like, "What?" It was completely the opposite of what he thought was going to play out. He thought, "This coach is an idiot. I'm going to be so slow. I'll never run faster than a mile."
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to our earlier discussion. The people that finally got their strategy right, the approach right, and putting in the distance work, slowing down, doing key workouts that are well under control, spacing out their workouts, figuring out their own profile, end up breaking through barriers that they never really believed would happen.
Bit like Pete here. Pete, his very first marathon was 2:23. That was how long ago was that, Pete?
That was in 2008, mate. Yeah.
But he's not ran faster since. So
Pete, let me coach you, man.
there you go,
Let's
Pete.
talk. Let's talk. Yeah.
He's what age are
I'll
you now?
give you 3
41?
months I'll give you 3 months for free. And I don't usually do that. I rarely do that.
Right.
Like
Well,
once every 5 years.
sounds good to me.
All right. Well,
2:23
you got my
marathon.
contact info. Get a hold
No.
of me.
So, by the way, so obviously, I came to the party a little bit late this evening. Not long in from work. I've now got a just turned 6-week-old daughter. So apologies that I wasn't in promptly. And obviously, I know we started recording a bit earlier. Just check. So, Dr. Thomas Tinman Schwartz. How do you prefer to be addressed? Is it Thomas, Dr. Thomas Tinman? What do you prefer?
Oh, Coach Schwartz or Dr. Schwartz. Those are probably my way. The reason I don't like, I'm not even thrilled about Tinman is I had my name stolen by guys who were basically
Right.
low level people who
Yeah.
wanted to make money off of my name, and so
I
refused
understand.
to
Yeah.
give up my name. So
But
it's a bad
Coach
taste
Schwartz,
in my mouth.
Coach
Coach
Schwartz is
Schwartz,
good.
yeah, Coach Schwartz is fine, and with
Great.
you guys, and for brevity, just Coach is fine.
Coach is great, brilliant. Now, listen, I'll definitely love to talk to you about some marathon training. Yeah, we'll get in touch after this. So thanks for that. One of the things I don't know if Sean mentioned, we tend to do with our guests. We're only 5 episodes in, but we just do like a sort of just a quick. I was interested to hear you talking about your time as a runner as well as a marathon runner. But we just do like a sort of a kind of a quick fire round. It's just about 10 or 11 questions or so. They're not specifically running related. Are you okay if I just fire them at you? Would that be all right?
Okay, go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, so number 1, best achievement or proudest PB?
I ran a cross country race in my late 20s, and it was, I think, British style or European style, where they had hay bales.
Okay.
You had to jump over hay bales going up a 600-yard long hill, and you had to do 2 laps, and you got to the bottom, got to the top of the hill, then you plummeted down and had to run through a long creek, a wide creek. And so I was up to almost my knees. And it was 2 laps, as I said, and I was 168th at the mile. I know that because there were only 170 people in the race, and there were two guys behind me. And I was just running steadily. I was coaching at a university at the time, and I was pacing a gentleman on our team who had walking pneumonia for 3 weeks, and he'd only had a week of training, and he was nervous. And so I asked the director of the meet if I could run in the race. He said, sure, as long as you don't go through the finish chute. And so I was pacing this young fella, and we were running. I said, just run with me. And we ran together and navigated through the crowds that all went out too fast, and we stayed steady close to 5 minutes a mile. And running up this long hill, jumping over these hay bales, and this kid is tripping on the hay bales because he's got no coordination. I had run the steeple, so I understood how to do it. And I ended up veering off and not going through the chute, and I would have been 3rd, and he got 5th.
Okay.
He was 3rd. That was my proudest one because it was a demonstration of everything I'd ever talked about to my athletes, and executing smart instead of getting all amped up and
brilliant. Oh, that's interesting.
And so it was a good day.
Okay.
It was a good day.
Brilliant. Okay. And then next one, your favorite male athlete.
Steve Ovett. I named my son's middle name is Ovett.
Wow.
Tegan Ovett Schwartz. So he was my man.
Oh, really? That's a great shout. In fact, I've got a little sort of a Steve Ovett anecdote, which we'll come on to in a minute. So we'll come back to that. But that's great. Yeah, obviously some athlete. And then next one, your favorite female athlete.
Probably Joan Benoit Samuelson. Kind of a tie. Joan Benoit Samuelson and Greta Weitz.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. Great shout. And then, so I might need to change this question because we normally say football, but we'll go soccer. Is your favourite soccer team or football team?
Manchester United.
Manchester United. Right. I'm going to need to leave the room. Now, I'm a Liverpool fan, so as you'll know, big rivals. But
what? I don't even know what.
It's that team that have won the European Cup 6 times. But let's not. Man U are a good.
I don't remember. Are you sure?
Yeah, listen, I've got mutual respect for both clubs. Let's leave that there. Okay, and then your favorite movie?
Running Brave. It's
right.
Yeah, right. It's about one of our true Olympians. He was Olympic gold medalist in 1964 in the 10,000 meters. Billy Mills.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
It's a story of his life. Basically, grew up on a reservation in South Dakota. Half the world was against him, and it pretty much was at that time in that era.
Yeah.
He became the South Dakota state champion. Got a scholarship, University of Kansas. Ran at Kansas.
Brilliant.
Did well at Kansas, but he had an adversarial relationship with the university coach. Luckily, he didn't give up running. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps, was stationed, as I recall, down in Texas, and he met an Aussie coach named Pat Cloesy, who was at the time a runner for the University of Houston and the NCAA champ and AAU champ in the 3-mile. And Pat was taking up coaching and started coaching Billy Mills. And Billy was finally enjoying running the way it was meant to be in his mind. He was doing a combination of distance runs, some interval work, but it wasn't this brutal interval nearly every day type approach that he had in the university level. And Billy had always been one of those who liked running along the roads in the countryside. They gave him peace. Pat understood this and developed Billy to a high level. And if you read more about Billy's story or listen to his YouTubes, you will be impressed with his
Great.
overall spiritual kind of approach to things. He went beyond what anybody ever dreamed of and beat Ron Clark and Gamoudi in the '64 Olympics. It was kind of a huge achievement. He improved 2 full minutes in about a year.
Yeah.
He had always written in his blog 28-25, 28-25. That's what he ran in the Olympics.
Okay, so running brave, right? I'll make a list, a note of that, because I'll need to catch that one. Brilliant. Okay, so just on that note, out of interest, I think it's actually a Canadian film. It's slightly different to the film you mentioned there, a little bit more light-hearted, although it has got some kind of good messages with it. I did the Toronto Waterfront Marathon back in 2008, and I stayed with some family friends in Canada, and they introduced me to a film called The Miracle of St. Ralph. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, if you get a spare hour or two, yeah, check it out. Check it out. Okay. Next question I've got for you is your most interesting person you've met through running.
I met a lot of famous people.
Okay.
Marcus O'Sullivan. He brought me into Villanova University to be a keynote speaker a few years back, and we spent dinner time together for several hours the night before, and I enjoyed the conversation. He was a world-class miler who had been through some ups and downs. It was very successful. Then had a challenge just past age 30. Then he thought he had to retire because he was getting worse, and then he, by luck, ran into Gerard down over in Ireland. I think Gerard is the one who worked with Paula Radcliffe. Gerard was a triathlete and was getting into lactate threshold training and introduced Marcus to it while he was over there seeing his family. I think Marcus was 32 at the time. And Marcus ended up revamping his entire training approach now that he was older to using lactate threshold training.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was, and it revamped his career completely. It was a fascinating conversation, because the reason we got on the conversation is because my critical velocity concept is essentially a slight higher level than lactate threshold. And there's going to be lots of different people, scientists will throw different terms out. There's the first threshold and the second threshold and all this sort of thing. But what we're talking about is in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of VO2 max as being an optimal zone for fit runners.
Yeah.
So that's why Marcus brought me in. He wanted me to talk about my critical velocity concept because it matched very similar to what he had done as an athlete to revitalize his career under Gerard's direction, and then what he was doing at Villanova University with his own athletes, doing a lot of lactate threshold testing and assignment of workouts based on the lactate threshold. And I told him basically all of this was going on big time already with swimmers in the 1970s. Then cyclists, then cross-country skiers. I was reading about it already in 1984, and was applying it in 85 because there were articles in major magazines about it. So, I just love listening to Marcus's story. He's so personable. His history competing as an international athlete was fascinating, and his willingness to grow and learn is what connected with me, because I had this same philosophy: grow, learn, keep wondering, is there better ways of doing things? Keep asking questions, and that's how Marcus is.
That's great. So Marcus O'Sullivan, okay, thanks for that. So basically there might be hope for me yet, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's interesting as well, because as Sean mentioned, we spoke to Neil Gorley, who's obviously just preparing for the World Championships in Budapest in the 1500, and we asked him a few questions around sort of VO2 max, lactate threshold, and he sort of said his view was he's not obsessed. He doesn't worry too much about the exact figure that his VO2 max is, but he is very keen. One of his main things is looking at improving that lactate threshold. So that's interesting. There's a recurring theme there. Brilliant. All right. And then next question I've got is your favorite race.
My favorite race.
Even if it's the one with the hay bales.
I was thinking as a spectator. I wasn't thinking as an athlete.
Anything at all. So, like, I often, I don't know if it's the same for you guys over there for sort of at Christmas time or Thanksgiving. There's a popular race in England in December. It's normally a sort of, it's called a turkey trot or a festive caper race, and that's one of my favourite races because often I do quite well in it. And if I won the race, I'd win a turkey. If I came second, you'd win a chicken, and if you came third, you got a Christmas cake. So if I didn't win the turkey, then basically I was in the doghouse on Christmas Day, put it that way. So what about yourself? Favorite race?
Oh gosh. We have Thanksgiving in America.
Yep.
And turkey trot is a very common race. So
Okay.
that's one that I really like because the weather is perfect.
Yeah.
It cools down finally, and it's just nothing better. And then when you combine that with things like the trees, we're just at the end of our fall, autumn, where
Yeah.
the leaves are just about to all fall, or they've all fallen, they're on the ground, and oranges and yellows and reds. I like that time of the year, October, early November.
Yeah.
Here in North America is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it makes you love being a runner.
Brilliant. Okay.
Your air's cool, you're running fast, you're
Yeah.
feeling just vibrant.
Yeah. Great time of year to run. Okay. Next one, I'm most probably interested to hear this answer. So I'm sure there could be a whole list of them, but if you were just to pick one, what would be your favorite session?
Training session is my
Yep.
critical velocity workout. The one that I've assigned to my high level runners since the 80s is 777.
Okay.
7 times a K at CV with the 200 jog, 7 times 30-second hills at 1500 to 800 race effort.
Yep.
With jog down recoveries and 7 reps of 15 seconds at between 800 and 400 effort with 30 to 45 seconds recovery. It's a comprehensive workout. It covers all the bases.
Brilliant.
You can do this workout, just this workout alone, if you're fairly talented and run an easy sub 4 minute mile off. I've had athletes run sub 4 minute miles with nothing other than that. And yes,
okay,
you can run with super shoes. It throws everything. Everything is being thrown off with these super shoes.
Yeah, sure.
But with prior to super shoes, you can, if you're a 14, 15, 5K guy, you can run 13:30 off this workout alone.
Okay, wow. Well, listen, as I said, we're quite into the early days of our podcast, Sean and I. But those that are on the following the Scottish Running podcast, you'll no doubt all of a sudden see a spike in that session on Strava. all gone. So Sean and I will almost certainly give that a crack. So we'll feed back to you how it goes. So brilliant. All right, thanks a lot. That's probably one of the best bits of info we've got. So thank you. Next one, your favourite food?
Pizza. Second is steak. Third is probably any kind of Italian food, spaghetti with great meatballs.
Brilliant.
That sort of thing. So yeah.
That's great, and that just shows you why. I mean, I might speak for myself here, but why most of us love running so much. Because I asked you for your favourite food, you gave me at least 3 foods there, and that's because we all eat. We love our food so much, and obviously, if we didn't run, we'd be a little bit larger than what we are now. So yeah. Brilliant. Okay, next one. Have you got a phobia or a pet hate?
Phobia. Well, I don't like snakes very much. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. No, good shout. We had frogs before, but snakes is a good one. Okay. And then final one of these little set of questions. This is one that I've just added in myself more because I have a bit of an obsession other than just running. There's another a sort of game that I tend to spend far too much time playing. So I'd be interested to know what your favourite poker hand is.
I don't play poker very much. I play euchre and 500. Euchre is I think it's a German game.
Okay.
I'm half English and Irish and half German.
Right.
So my mom's family is from Devonshire.
Oh wow.
We have relatives also from Southern Ireland near Cork.
Yeah.
And then we have some relatives in Germany too. So Euchre, I guess, where I grew up in northern Wisconsin, where you have Wisconsin and northern Illinois is very common. We have a lot of German, English, Irish, and Scandinavians.
Okay.
It's like almost nobody else. So
Great. All right. So not massive poker player. No, that's fine. That's fine. And no, just going back. So I was interested. You were talking about obviously Harry Wilson. So that's Steve Yvette's coach. I've actually read this quote out before on another episode of the podcast, but it's one that. Like we talked about, that winter time of running it's a great time for endurance athletes to get out there and train. So I'll just you may have heard this already. I believe it's accurate. So I'll just read you this quote just to see what your thoughts on this are. So this is a quote from Seb Coe, who was obviously a rival of Steve Yvette. So
I know what you're going to say. Christmas.
That's the one. Yeah, I'm going to read it anyway.
Yeah, that's one of the best, man. Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it. It's great.
I love this one. So it says, it was a harsh winter. I ran 12 miles on Christmas morning. It was a hard session. I got home, showered, and felt pretty happy with what I'd done. Later that afternoon, sitting back after Christmas lunch, I began to feel uneasy, but was not quite sure why. Suddenly it dawned on me. I thought, I bet Steve Yvette's out there doing his second training session of the day on Christmas Day. I put the kit back on. I faced the snow and ice. I did a second training session. I ran several miles, including some hill work. Not long ago, I told Steve Yvette the story. He laughed and said, "Did you only go out twice that day?" So I wonder. I'd love to know if that is genuinely true.
I love that. I love that. That's why I actually love that chat. That those guys competing against each other, because they brought out the competitiveness to a much higher level. You know,
Yeah.
Look at some other great runners of that era too. So I mean, it's sad that some of them get ignored, but no, I like the work ethic, the competitiveness, what they were doing for our sport. They were inspiring people to get out there and I don't know. I like people who are good role models, and I think both of them had their own style. Seb, in my view, was a cultured man. He was maybe the kind of guy that some would say would be aloof, but I think it's more or less that he was focused very intensely on what he was doing.
Yeah.
He with his father, and before him, George Gandy, who was one of the greatest coaches in UK history, in my opinion. Often people don't realize that Seb Coe ran 2 world records, or was it 3? He ran 800 and mile world record on him. It might have been 1,000 too. We'll have to take a look.
Yeah.
George Gandy gets overlooked, but great athletes like them and motivate other people. On the other hand, style contrast, Yvette was kind of the working man, at least at the blue collar type of guy, and that's kind of, I came from very modest background, and so maybe that's why I kind of connected with Steve Yvette. And he was affable. He was more jovial and that sort of thing. I didn't think he could ever get goaded into any kind of thing that he didn't want to do or say by the press. I really respected that. And Harry, I think, was a big part of that as well. But I think Steve's upbringing and it was certainly a part of being authentic, being real. Not that Seb wasn't, but I think both of them motivated us in the United States to be better athletes, to get after it, to set big goals, to go after our dreams. And anyway, that's my take on those fellows.
No, that's great. The only other thing, just to add with Steve Yvette, and this is just what obviously Sean's already mentioned that my PB for the marathon, which is going back some years now. But my only other sort of claim to fame, really, so Steve Yvette, I don't exactly know what year it was or whether it was the inaugural race, but Steve Yvette won the Dartford half marathon actually. So bearing in mind he was predominantly an 8 and 15 guy, but he
103.
won the were you aware he won that race, the Dartford half marathon?
Just over 103.
Yeah, I'm not right. Okay, so and that's if it was, that's impressive because it's on a hilly course as well. But there's another race that is quite iconic that I'm trying to get my name onto because it's always good to look back at history in years and say, oh, so and so won this race and have your name on that same list of illustrious winners. So a friend of mine and also myself, I'm fortunate. I did manage to get my name on that trophy. So I've won the Dartford half, slightly slower than 63 minutes, but there you go. You can only beat who's there. So. That's it. But no, thanks for that. And I'll just go back over to Sean if he's got anything more to go on, or I'm sure you've got plenty more to talk to us about. And I'll be to go and see how I'm getting on with my daughter in a moment.
Yeah, get
If
loads.
you ever want to talk about UK running, man, I'm in. There's so much more. I can throw out Dave Moorcroft, who I've modeled a lot of stuff after.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about him all the time. When I talk about what is really physically possible and what is doped or using super shoes, I use examples. I'm like, I don't believe these guys running in the 1250s who can't run close to, can't run close to 350 in the mile. 349.68 is Moorcroft, 146 and change in the 800, 732, and he runs 13 flat, mostly by himself, no pacers in Oslo. And probably 12:53 to 57 if you had a pacer or something.
Yeah.
That's about as good as it gets, in my opinion, legit legal.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing guys prior to these super shoes running below 12:53, running below 7:28, 7:29. I mean, you've got Owita and people like that running 7:29. I think that's about as legit as you can get. I have red flags constantly. My coach friends and I are saying that's 60 to 80% chance they're doping and they're not getting caught.
That's
Now
interesting.
super shoes are making it worse because now you have super shoes, which is equal to PEDs.
Yeah.
Right. And what if somebody has PEDs and super shoes?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, there was
Joe
that.
Bloke 30-minute guy can be no longer Joe Bloke can run 27:15.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was that Diamond League. Was it 2 months ago, possibly? And then I will watch the highlights on YouTube, and I was like, holy, like Jesus Christ! There was the first 13 guys were under 13 minutes, but the guy in 13th he ran like 12:54, but the winner was like 12:41, 42, and it was all. I was like, in years gone by, you know, if someone broke 30 minutes at the Diamond League, you're like, wow, that's, and he was well ahead. But now 13 guys under 30 minutes, and it's just, it's either like you said, or you know, could be a bit of doping, or are the super shoes given that much of an advantage? You know,
It is. I calculated as 0.71 per lap for a 350 miler.
wow. But that kind of makes you think as well, like back to Arthur Lydiard's time, like Peter Snell ran 144, but he ran it on
grass.
On grass
but
as well.
It's even more impressive this when you think about two other factors. Number one, he had to run an extra turn because it was under it wasn't a 400-meter track. It was shorter, so he had to run one extra turn.
Wow.
Number two, he's wearing spikes that are at least twice, if not almost three times as heavy as people nowadays. I used to wear those spikes. They were like 11 ounces. These guys are wearing 4.3 to 5.3 ounce shoes. That's a huge savings in energy. Huge. Let alone carbon fiber plates and all the and bouncy tracks. You put Peter Snell 354 and 144 on grass on today's, man, I don't care. I'd still take him. I'd take him and Jim Ryan over Jakob Ingebrigtsen any day in a one-on-one battle in the mile or 1500.
Yeah, because like Peter Snell as well, he was like a rugby player. He was quite raw muscle, quite like a raw athlete, and he had a lot of power and a lot of raw speed as well. So it'd be good to see if he was in this day and age, if he was, you know, with the super shoes, etc., on a track, not a grass track, etc. You know.
Both Ryan and Snell had enormous amounts of power. I had the privilege of running against Jim Ryan when he was in his early 40s. He was doing a tour around America for exercise-induced asthma, which is what he had during his entire career. Right. It was difficult to deal with back then. And he ran in a 5K road race, and I showed up at 7:30 in the morning to run this race. I'd worked until 11:30 p.m. and I thought, I'll just jump in this race and maybe see where I am fitness-wise. And I'm running along kind of feeling sorry for myself because there were three guys up above, about 100 yards ahead of me. I could not close the gap, and I was just exhausted from staying up late. And I heard these steps come from behind me, and my steps were tap, 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 tap. And I hear tap, 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 tap. I look over, and there's this guy with super long legs right next to me. I'm of average height, but this guy's fairly tall. He has long legs, and he's running on the balls of his feet, long levers. I'm like, and he has this high arm carriage like this, you know. I'm like, it took me about 150 yards to figure out this is Jim Ryan. Jim Ryan, I got to beat Jim Ryan. So we duke it out for about a full mile. We turn the corner, and it's a downhill finish, and he crushes me by 30 meters in the downhill finish. And I was always thinking that I could beat anybody at the end of the race because I had good sprint speed. But boy, he showed me a new game. And I was wobbling through the finish chute, just in total oxygen deficit. I couldn't see, I was seeing stars. And he comes up, puts his arms around me, and walks me over and puts me under a big shade tree. Goes and gets me water. And I'm all the while wanting to talk to him, but I'm just dizzy and out of breath and everything. And I drink the water, and he helps me stand up. It's like, you're going to be okay. You'll be okay. And I just start unloading questions at him. How did you deal with anxiety? Obviously, the press was all over you. You were a superstar. You were on Sports Illustrated and every major magazine and every TV show. How did you deal with all of that? He goes, naps. He goes, they can't interview you for taking a nap, and you can't think about all that stuff if you're sleeping. He goes, sometimes you just got to get away and get peace of mind. A nap will do it. Yeah. And just on cue, all the reports, the press came running in, swarmed right around. He goes, I'm so sorry. I got my 3 minutes with him, you know. So here's the guy that ran. Think about what this guy did. He went out for running as a sophomore in high school. So he's 15 years old. He did not run as a freshman in high school. We have 4 years as a secondary school. I don't know if you had that over there. And so he goes out as a 15-year-old. He runs cross country and gets third from last in his very first race. By the end of the 3-month season, he's sixth at the Kansas State cross country meet. He improved that much. By the following spring, he runs 4:06 in the mile. He's only been running a few number of months. This is on cinders, by the way. Cinders, wow. Right? By the following cross country season, he's been running only just a fraction over a year. He wins a state meet. The following spring, he's been running less than 2 years. He makes the United States Olympic team in the 1,500 meters and runs in Tokyo. He's a 3:39 guy in less than 2 years of training.
Wow. That's impressive.
On cinders. On cinders.
Wow. Cinders, yeah.
I think he's America's most talented runner we've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hear some of the stories and stuff as well, and some of the races he's running. Yeah. And you see pictures of him, he just looks, you're like, wow.
It's too bad that the Olympics were in Mexico City. First of all, they got mononucleosis that summer of the Olympics. So he lost like 6 weeks of training, right? And he had barely enough time to get in shape to make the U.S. Olympic team. And then it's at 7,800 feet above sea level. And he runs against a guy who's born at high elevation. He had beat Kip Keino 18 times prior to the 68 Olympics. Not once did he lose to Kip Keino. And then he loses there. And then he never lost to Kip Keino again.
Yeah.
Had it been in Munich or London or something, he would have been a legend.
Yeah.
He would have been a legend.
Just whilst we're on American athletes just now, also like Steve Prefontaine, sorry, very, very famous American athlete. It's good, especially that Oregon. When you think about Oregon, it's no Steve Prefontaine. But if Steve, if he didn't have that, the accident that killed him, when it came to the '76 Olympics, do you think Steve Prefontaine would have won the 5,000?
I think he would have been top two. I think it would have been top two. It's hard to know. The 76 Olympics was a very weird situation, and most people don't know the background of what happened. Actually, Henry Rono and Mira Siefter were in the stands and never competed because both countries loaded up their athletes on planes and shipped them back because of the apartheid situation. They were there, and they would have made a huge difference in how that played out. So it's not just that Steve Prefontaine died in that tragic car accident in May of 75 and would have been a factor in the 76 Olympics. You know, you got Lassie Viren and Brandon Foster up there duking it out, right? It would have been a different game had you had Steve Prefontaine, who actually was finally doing more mileage. The winter that he died was the first time he ever hit 100 miles a week. He only ran 70 to 75 miles a week most weeks as a university athlete. He was 21 years old when he died.
Wow.
Okay, it wasn't like he was a mature guy in his mid or late 20s. This guy had so much potential, just so much potential. And when you add Steve Prefontaine, Henry Rono, and Mirit Siefter in there, what a difference that would have been in the 76 Olympics, those three guys.
That could have been like the greatest Olympic final of all time.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, Pre was young, though. Pre was young compared to Henry Rono, who went to university at Washington State University. He's almost 26 years old as a freshman. Okay. And Mira Siefter, who I think was older, like 28 or 30 or something at the time. But yeah, Steve Prefontaine is a legend in our country, not just because of his passing, but because of the style of his racing. He went to the front, he pushed as hard as he could, he made people hurt. And the only one that I believe, there are only two guys in NCAA history who I believe had the same approach, who challenged him significantly, were Nick Rose of the UK and Jerry Lindgren. Those two had the same type of go to the front, hammer as hard as you can, and just make people hurt. And hopefully they fall off because they just can't handle pressure.
Yeah, Jerry, I
Very
read
unique
his
style
book.
of racing.
Yeah, I read a book years ago, Jerry Lindgren, but he said at the start, I don't know how to write this, so I just thought I'd write it from the point of view of my shadow. It was really good. And speaking about his training and stuff, and yeah, he did some crazy mileage.
Oh, he did. He was in high school, you know, running 150 miles a week. Went up to 200 one week in high school, and he would get up. He had a very challenging home life. We'll just put it that way. And he would even get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and go run 10 miles. I think a lot of it. I think it was not just his desire to do well, but his desire to relieve the stress. In my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to speak for him. Just having listened to him and read, I think he had some very difficult situation. In my opinion, if he were in the modern era, he would have been one top two guy in our modern era, sub 27 guy. He just was absolutely committed to excellence beyond belief, and had the kind of ferocity that makes the champion stand above others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's some great stories we've had there about American athletes. But let's get back onto yourself. So, in terms of like training, coaching, so for your athletes just now, so what would a typical like week or month look like for your athletes?
Well, depends upon if you're talking about far away from their championship event or not. I'm not one that follows a strict phasic system. I've argued against it for a long time, simply because the way it's been conventionally set up is you only do one focus per phase, and then you get rid of the previous focus. And I think that's completely wrong approach. I've never believed that doing just base work, mileage based work, and then going into the season and dropping mileage and doing all kinds of high intensity is a good approach.
Yeah.
To me, base is always what your lactate threshold is. That's what your base is. So if your lactate threshold is slower, let's stop thinking about what percentage of VO2 max is, because you don't have the lab equipment and all that. Let's just think about if you could run a 1 hour race, that would be pretty close to your lactate threshold if you're a highly developed endurance trainer like you, Pete. You're a marathon type guy. But if your lactate threshold pace, your 1 hour pace is slower, your base has eroded.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
It
sense.
doesn't matter if you're doing high mileage and if your lactate threshold pace is slower, or if you're during the competitive season, you're doing less mileage and higher intensity workouts. If your lactate threshold is slower, your base is slower. Think of it that way always. So if you're one of those, let's say you're a middle distance guy or gal, and you're in the competitive season, you've got to maintain that lactate threshold velocity, because all that anaerobic capacity, fast 400s, 300, 200s, 100s rep work isn't going to do you any good if you're off the back. You can't even be there with 300 to go, 1500 race. It won't do you any good. You're 10 seconds back to the back because your lactate threshold is so bad. You're fatigued, right? So your base is always where your threshold is. Think of it this way. If you wanted to use something as simple as heart rate, whatever the pace is for your 90% of your max heart rate, that's your measure of your base. If it was 6 minutes before and now it's 5:50, your base is better. Your aerobic base is better.
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Do it under the same conditions. Maybe warm up. Always use roughly the same weather if possible. Go to the track or some loop, a bike path or something that's consistently, available without foot traffic, and run that loop and try to run at 90% heart rate. The first 5 minutes it won't be there because it takes a while to raise it, but you're going to shoot for maybe 85, 86, 87% in the first 4 or 5 minutes. And then somewhere around 5 or 6 minutes, it will come close to the 90%. And keep running and see what your 90% heart rate is. And make a decision based on that. If your pace is slower at your 90%, you need to do more endurance work. All that fast interval stuff is of no value to you.
Yeah.
If you're rock solid and at the level you need to be for your 90% heart rate, now you can add in that other quality stuff.
Yeah. Like that's why, asking, because there's been so many people in my local area and also in Scotland. The Pete probably comes across this as well when he lived in England. But you get people who maybe run like a 5K or a 10K and they go, "Oh, I ran rubbish." And you go, "All right, what happened?" They go, "I just need a lot more speed." And it's like, but you look at their splits and it's like, you're now at the first K at 3 minutes and then you finished with a 350. So you've got speed to hit a 3 minutes. You've just not got the endurance to hold it. But then you see them. But they'll go to a track a few days after that, 110% race pace effort, and they'll be doing 400s, 200s, killing themselves even further.
Yeah, it's the law of perpetuation. This kind of flawed thinking has been happening for decades. I mean, at least 50 years.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. Think about how many people have set a PB after they put in a base phase of training.
Yeah.
Or their second race back. The first race is what in America we call a rust buster, because you're not used to racing. And the second one is your PR, your PB by a big margin.
Yeah. By a lot. I remember I was in the middle of a marathon block, doing the big sessions, but wasn't particularly running fast. Marathon pace was 6 minute miles. I don't know what you work in, Ks or miles, but say 6 minute miling. Yeah. So I was going 3:45 a K for 10K, and then going straight into 6K threshold at 3:35 a K. And at the end, I'd be like, "Oh, it's tough going." And I had the 10K coming up as part of the marathon plan. And then that day, I went through the first 3K in like 9:57. And my training partner at the time, I was like, "We're going at sub 3:20 a K here, and I feel incredible. Like, how is this?" He's like, "I don't know. And then I got like a 30-second PB during marathon training. And that's when my mind started kind of going, I don't need to, I don't really need to do all this eyeballs out stuff. I became faster by actually running slower.
That's right. There are a lot of people that set their 5 or 10K PBs, sometimes even their 1500 PBs or mile PBs when they've been doing marathon training. Paula Radcliffe became better at the track in the 10,000. What did she run, like 30:01? And what was that, 14:20 and something and change when she was marathon training.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Right?
Absolutely incredible. But
so it's that long distance running wasn't making them slower.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think with the Arthur Lydiard training as well, a lot of people think it's that's just long, easy jogging. But I don't think that's maybe misconstrued kind of over the years. But I think what people don't realize is that like a lot of that kind of easy running, it was done like kind of like you weren't just jogging slowly. You were running a wee bit quicker, but you're tiring yourself out. And then the main kind of sessions they did, it was like 3/4 effort, as he called it, and they built up their endurance that way.
Yeah. Just so you know, all those tables came from Gösta Homer from Sweden.
Yeah.
That Lydiard used, all of them. So Gösta Homer had 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 7/8 effort, and they were based on 2.5% increments. So if you're at 7/8 effort, you were running 2.5% slower than all out for that particular distance. 3/4 effort was 5%. Half effort was 7.5%. And a quarter effort was 10%. So those were what Lydiard got that. So in his first book, back in the early 60s, 63, I have it running to the top. Lydiard is basically using Gösta Homer's tables and assigning times for different distances. And it's a good strategy. But the concept is really simple. It's based on the distance of the time that you could travel for the particular distance that you're running. So 3/4 let me do a real quick one if you're interested. Let's say it's half effort. So you're gonna go out and do 13.1 miles at half effort. So you said 1 hour, 3 minutes, right, Pete?
For Steve,
for that one course you were on? I thought you said you came close.
I was a bit.
Give me a time for you, Pete.
1 hour 9 on the Dartford half course.
Okay, so half effort is 7.5% slower.
Okay.
So you would run it in 1:14:10. In other words, you'd be running at 539.73 per mile, and you'd be running at 331 per K. Does that make sense? So it's a decent aerobic pace, but it's not a killer pace. It's going to put you into the grave because you're just maxing out.
Yeah.
Right. The point is aerobic training with a variety of different intensities scheduled into a plan where you purposely go higher and lower in your intensities, but you're still putting in the total volume, ends up being a great recipe for success. I've said it over and over for decades. The way of thinking about training is try to be a chef. If you don't want to be a chef for yourself, have a good chef being in charge of figuring out which ingredients go into the recipe, how much of the ingredients, how you mix the ingredients, and what temperature you use to bake or cook your food. If you turn up the heat too much, even if you got all the ingredients right, but you turn up the intensity, the heat too much, your chances of success are very small because you got to get it just right. You can't leave it on too long or it's going to burn.
Yeah.
Right? But if you turn down the intensity, you can cook it for a long period of time, and your window of opportunity for success is very good. I learned that from my grandmas my grandmothers would make food like steak or something like that, or meat for my grandpas who were losing their teeth because they were old guys and they didn't have the best dental care back then. They ended up getting false teeth. Is that they would turn the temperature way down and cook it for 3 hours instead of for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, low temperature for 3 hours. And it was never burnt.
Yeah.
It was always tender. There was never such a thing as a roast beef or roast anything that was hard, dried out.
Yeah.
Ever. And think of that as how we could do our guide our own training. We choose the right ingredients and we choose the right temperature.
That's a brilliant way to
Right.
look at it. A brilliant way, actually. It's me opened up my eyes a bit there. But also, look, we're going to wrap up very soon, but just one last thing for myself. So obviously you follow UK running, and well, in the UK just now we've got a lot of brilliant athletes, especially in Scotland. Get over the marathon, Callum Hawkins, Derek Hawkins, his brother, especially over the 1500 meters. Just now, the Scottish guys are dominating. But on the American side, when obviously Galen Rupp had his Olympics, got his 2 medals, but then when it came to obviously the last one there, he finished in the top 10. But who's is there an American athlete who's kind of bridging that gap now to kind of replace Galen, or?
We got a couple of Nike Bowerman guys and a couple on guys that are really, really doing well. Your Joe Kleckers and that sort of thing. I just don't think that we have anybody that is in the same type of position that Galen Rupp was when he was on top of his game yet. Maybe our guys will get there. Maybe that's coming down the road, perhaps at the Olympic Games coming up in Paris. It remains to be seen. We have guys that are good, but the problem is it's difficult for anybody to really figure out how fast they really are, because they're using super shoes, or they're running on the Boston University track, which gives you probably 4 seconds a mile. That track is faster than any track in the world. Some guy will run 3:49 or 50 on there. I'm sorry, but that's a 3:53 or 4. Some guys running 12:53 on that track. I like the athlete, but I'm sorry, that's about a 13:03 on an outdoor track. So it's really hard for, I think, our public, and at least in the United States, to have a legitimate understanding of who is really capable of filling the shoes of someone like Galen Rupp. Because when you have these super shoes and super tracks, it throws things up. All I know is head-to-head in the World Champs, in your case, the Commonwealth Games or the World Championships, in the Olympic Games, for us, that's when we really can measure our athletes. I've always thought that how well you do in your own country doesn't really mean a lot. How well you do against the world's best, that tells us true story. And hopefully the UK and the United States prove that they have good athletes who can compete with the best in the world when it comes to the World Championships and Olympic Games. I like the Olympic Games as the best measure. I've been around enough to know that the Olympic Games is what people really focus on the most. That not everybody gets ready for the World Championships. Not everybody takes it to that level, or thinks of it as important as the Olympic Games. So they're not really as focused or dedicated, but the Olympic Games are really going to show us.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just got that history.
You medal in the Olympics, you're legit. You medal, you're legendary material in your country.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like Josh Kerr, 1500 meter runner from Edinburgh. Yeah, he get bronze, and it's just like we can even imagine. Like we would imagine, maybe some guy from England down Pete's way.
Kerr's got to do it again. Gurley's got to do it again. You got some good middle distance runners right now.
Yeah,
you really do. But they've got to prove it in the Olympic Games. They got to get to the finals, and they've got to medal, or at least be in the top 5 or 6. You do that, then you have earned respect for sure.
Yeah, great.
I think it's with Mo Farah. I think that was kind of once in a generation. You get a runner like that, a double Olympic champion, double. I don't think Britain will have a guy like that again. But...
That's true. I mean, you had Ovett Coe, back in the day. I mean, they were rightfully the owners of legendary status.
Definitely. But I was going to peek in a wee second, but going back to a Steve Ovett one there, we interviewed a man. He's actually from Greenock, where I come from. He was a cross country specialist, and he was part of the last Great British men's cross country team to medal at the World Cross Country Championships.
Yeah.
And he at the Scottish Championships, the cross country one year, Steve Ovett turned up, and media everywhere, and then Tommy Murray is his name. So Tommy went off, won the race, and then after the race, Steve Ovett finished fourth. And I think you'll like this. All the media came round Steve Ovett, and Steve Ovett said, "Why are you talking to me? The winner's over there. Go and talk to him first, and then come and see me." And I was like, that just kind of shows you the kind of guy he is. Just a really
That's
genuine
right.
guy.
Character, absolute character. He respected his fellow competitors. You know, what I loved is the middle distance people back then. I don't know if it's still the case in the UK, but they were competing in cross country. Steve Cram, Steve Ovett, Peter Elliott, Graham, what's his name? Williamson.
Yeah, Graham Williamson.
Graham Williamson. All those guys competed in cross country. They didn't shy away from stuff like that. You use it as fantastic foundational training, but they showed up for their clubs.
Yeah.
You know, showed up and represented their clubs. I've always said you're in great cross country shape. It's easy to be in great track shape. The foundational endurance and strength you get from running over hill and dale and the mud and everything else, sets you up for success in track.
Yeah,
Great.
Pete hates cross country.
Well, that's the thing. You're right, because you say I'm never in good cross country shape these days. I've run a few decent cross country races years ago, never. And that's part of one of my problems, I think, where I'm going wrong. And also at the minute, any race, it's also a bit of a mental block, if I'm honest. Any race I get to, you get to the slightest incline or anything that isn't flat road, even if it's a slight trail or just slightly my feet are a bit uneasy, unless it's flat fast road, I'm in trouble. You know, we can change tiniest incline and it's honestly it's game over for me. And that is why, unfortunately, even my co-host Sean Gaffney has managed to beat me at a cross country race. Unfortunately, so bad times. I've let some people get well, I don't know if you'd class it as a scalp, Sean, but that's
Listen, my marathon PB is 2:44 and yours is 2:23. So if I can beat you over cross country, I'm taking it.
Yeah, no, and 100%, as you should, and that's a testament to the training you're doing and how well you were running. But it also highlights a big weakness for me. So things for us to both work on.
I think you beat me once at a cross country, but it was like the ground was like hard frost. So it was like a road race. So you beat me by like 20 seconds.
There you go.
Okay. So you haven't learned to glide.
No,
Pete.
Definitely
not.
You
got to learn to scoot over soft ground. You can't pound into it.
Right. Well, we'll incorporate into our conversation about the training afterwards then.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's set up a cross country race goal at the end of the autumn.
Absolutely.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Okay.
But nothing else from me. And Tom, thank you very, very much for coming on. I know you're a very busy man, and thank you for giving us the time.
Thank you. It's been a privilege. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Pete, have you got any more questions for Dr. Tom?
No, not for now. Not for now.
No problem at all. Well,
all right, fellas.
If anyone is interested in Dr. Tom Schwartz's coaching, he's got a website called tinmancoach.com, and on there is coaching services, etc. And it's not just for runners; it's for any cyclists and triathletes out there as well. And if you didn't hear earlier on, Dr. Thomas Schwartz, he's a USATF level 3 coach, and also it's now a World Athletics level 5 endurance coach as well. So you've been very, very good hands if you're looking for any new endurance goal. So yeah.
And that's it's tinmancoach.com, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you need to email, it's runfastcoach@gmail.com.
Right.
Just note that I don't care how fast you are. I only care that you're passionate about the sport, you're coachable, you're willing to commit yourself to trying to be a better version of yourself. I've coached slow people, I've coached fast people. I only care about those just fundamentals.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Cheers, fellas.
No problem.
Cheers.
I'll
Take care.
You too.
I'll just
Bye-bye.
turn off this video.